All right, everybody, this is the Horn Takes podcast. You're very rough around the edges. Texas sports talk destination. We do football. We'll do basketball. We'll do baseball in the spring. And then we'll talk all summer about getting ready for football again. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Deep Dive Thursday, but it's a bye week. So what are we going to deep dive? Well, I guess we'll just deep dive into the first half of the season for the Texas Longhorns. Maybe a little statistical measurement of this year's team versus last year's team. Check progress. It's hard to believe we're halfway through the season. College football, for me, is the most exciting time of the year. And it feels like it takes forever to get here once it's over. And then it's like a flash and it's gone. I think part of that is we don't go to all the games, but we go to quite a few games. And we don't live in Austin, and we don't live anywhere where Texas is going to play a road game ever again, more than likely. So we have to do a lot of travel. So it like chews up our weekends. But that's all right. It's what we like to do. Real quick, for those of you, we've been doing this new show format for the last couple weeks now. This is, I think, episode 7, definitely the second week of this new format. We were doing 2 shows a week, Thursday night, Tuesday night, around 6 p.m. I just wasn't feeling it. And so I thought, maybe I'll break this up into 4 shows a week. We'll have a little shorter shows, and it'll keep me more engaged in the process. So we've been trying it for the last couple weeks. We've got Exaggeration Monday, where it's all about Sean, Drunk Sean, his game thoughts while watching. There's almost zero statistics to go along with it. It's a total emotional ride on Exaggeration Monday. Then we do the after action review on Tuesday. And that's where we look a little closer at the game. At this point, we've rewatched the game or watched it on the TV broadcast, depending on if we win or not. So we have a little more, a little more to back up our claims, I guess you'd say. Thursday is Deep Dive Thursday, and generally on game week, we're digging into the game for that weekend for the Texas Longhorns. And then Friday's Prediction Friday. We'll do our Trace Otra games. For those of you that don't speak Spanish, that is 3 other games, and those are just the 3 games that are interesting to me that week outside of the Texas game. And then obviously we'll do a final prediction for the Texas Longhorn game on the weekend. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Starting to get a little more followers on YouTube. We pick away at it on Twitter. We do the best on TikTok. I take all these videos, chop them up, put little clips on TikTok. I need all my TikTok folks to get over on YouTube. If all 4,500 of my TikTok folks will get on YouTube, I'll be doing all right. I would appreciate it. Guys, check us out. The link is right there in the bio, by the way. My TikTok bio, there's a YouTube link. All you got to do is hit subscribe. You don't even have to put a credit card in, man. You just sign up. If you don't have a YouTube account, hit subscribe. Boom. Made Sean's day. If you just like to listen to podcasts, you can check us out at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts. So Texas is the halfway point of their season. They're 5-1 after 6 games. I think most Texas fans thought it best that this team would be 5-1 headed into their bye week, which comes at a perfect time, by the way. It's very rare that a bye week happens right in the middle of the season. And I think you could make arguments about, just situationally, it might be a better time to have a bye week at certain times, just depending on, some specific injuries for your team or, things like that. But I think generally speaking, the bye week right in the middle of the season is about as perfect as it can get planned. I just don't think any of the Texas fans thought the win was going to come against Bama and the loss was going to come to OU in that 5-1 scenario. There's a broad range of, sort of expectations coming into this season for Texas fans. You had folks that, there's always the guys that are, we're going to go undefeated. There's no way we're not going undefeated. And I don't know why there are those people, but there are. And they're not inherently wrong. They're just what they are. They're like hopeless optimists, and that's okay. And then you got some people that were on the. I mean, I've seen people say 9-3 is the ceiling for this team, and I was like, wow, really? I mean, I hope that's not the ceiling for the team. I mean, 9-3 would be better than 8-5. But I think given the talent on this roster and the amount of time this coaching staff has been together and with this team, 9-3 is a ceiling is not good at all. I was more like I'm like a 10-win guy. Like I felt like this team could come in, win 10 games, play for a Big 12 championship, and to me that would be a successful season for this team. So I don't think there was a lot of people that really bought into all this. You know, once we were 5-0 and we had gone on the road and beaten Alabama, we took care of KU pretty easily, which was, you know, one of those games a lot of people were hoping really hard or pretty certain Texas was going to lose that game. I just don't get the disrespect that Alabama gets in this whole scenario. You still have fans. This is the worst Alabama fan in 15 or worst Alabama team in 15 years. I don't know about that, man. I think the most vulnerable team that Alabama's had in 15 years or however long it's been since Saban's been there. But they are ultra talented, and Jalen Milroe is only going to continue to get better and better. But you had a lot of folks last week, especially some national pundit type folks saying, you know, this Texas team's the most complete team in the country. They're my number one team. And I thought that was a stretch. This team is far from complete. And I'm not sure there's any complete teams. But Texas certainly is not a complete team. So you know, maybe we win this game last Saturday and we're 6-0 and we do that in a convincing manner. Then I think you could start talking about, you know, is Texas the best team in the country? Obviously they didn't do that. So that conversation, let's just sweep it under the rug. We won't worry about it for a few more weeks. According to ESPN, Texas has played the toughest schedule in the country headed into week 7. I think a lot of people already knew that. It was definitely one of the tougher schedules. Maybe not the toughest, but certainly one of the tougher schedules. Offensively, man, this team has been... Well, first of all, this team is absolutely stacked with talent. We've been talking about that since the offseason. Just so many weapons. You know, you got Quinn Ewers, you got Adonai Mitchell, you got Xavier Worthy, JT Sanders, Jordan Whittington. Got some young receivers. Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore. And then kind of lost in all that, you had Jonathan Brooks at the running back position, who I've always been super high on Jonathan Brooks. Even out of high school, I was high on Jonathan Brooks. And so I'm not sure. I mean, I guess there's the whole, you know, you had Bijan Robinson, you had Roschon Johnson. Both those guys get drafted. You couldn't possibly be able to make up that type of production. Man, I still think this Texas running back room is very, very good. It may be better than it was last year, honestly. Like, if you look at the guys that actually had a chance to play, you look at the top 3 last year versus the top 3 this year, I'm not sure that this Texas running back room is not more talented. Jonathan Brooks, a lot of people don't know this. Jonathan Brooks scored like 62 touchdowns his senior year of high school. Just like absolute ridiculous. I don't even think you could do that on a video game. Like put it on the weakest setting, rookie, or I don't even know what those said. It's been so long since I played a football game on a console. But put it on the lowest setting, and you'd be hard-pressed to get 62 touchdowns in a single season. That's just crazy. Actually, I don't think you would be that hard-pressed to do it, but that's a video game. So Jonathan Brooks is an immensely talented guy. And so the expectations for this offense were that it was going to be, we were about to see some explosions. We were about to see a lot of points by this team. And this team is really good between the 20s. But it just absolutely dies in the red zone. 20 of 24, only 11 touchdowns. So out of 24 trips to the red zone, they've only scored 11 touchdowns. They're 65th in the country in red zone scoring, which is not good. Bottom half. Actually, it's right in the middle. So there's something going on. Something going on, like either with the execution or schematically when they get inside of the red zone. And I think it's probably both. Very rarely is one thing the reason for anything. I think passing wise, this offense it's further along than I thought it would be. I kind of predicted coming into this season. I thought Ewers might get around 3,000, 3,200. I think is what I said. I thought it would obviously be a huge improvement over last year, but I thought 3,200 yards that's pretty damn good. At the halfway point, Ewers is 128 for 184 for 1,704 yards and 11 touchdowns. He's completing almost 70% of his passes. His QB efficiency rating is 163, which puts him 22nd in the country. 17th in the country in yards per game at 284 yards per game. Just for reference, last season he was 172 for 296, 2,177 yards, and 15 touchdowns. So he's only 4 touchdowns away from meeting his total last year. Now, I know he missed 4 games last year. But it looks like even if you broke it down, you took those 4 games out, through 8 games, he's gonna eclipse these numbers he had last year. QB efficiency rating is way better. It's really been a team effort receiving. There's not been any receivers that just have. It's kind of interesting. Xavier Worthy stands out more from a catches perspective and total yardage perspective, but Adonai Mitchell has a lot of touchdowns. He scored some touchdowns in some key moments. He was really, really hot scoring touchdowns through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Not a single receiver on this team is in the top 50 in receiving yards per game. So they truly are spreading it out, and why wouldn't you? I think you're going to go into every single game, and a defense is going to try to attack you a little bit differently, and there's going to be different things that come open and different guys that come open. And, so for Quinn Ewers, he just got to figure that out and then take advantage of that. I think Quinn Ewers is, he's had his moments this year where he's looked kind of like old Quinn. And I say old Quinn, I mean last year Quinn. Sort of second half of the season, just not real confident. Maybe a little inaccurate. But I think the majority of this season, he's looked really good. I've been really impressed with sort of his maturation and his understanding of what it is he's supposed to be doing. He just doesn't look lost that much anymore. And most of the time he's very, very accurate. Running game, we talked about it. Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson go to the NFL. Everybody's worried about the running game coming into the season. I personally was not. A lot of people were. Texas rushed for 2,446 yards, 29 touchdowns in 2022. And that was good for 5.2 yards per carry. They finished 186 yards per game, which was 36th in the country last year. Right now, you look at it, they're on pace for 2,230 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 4.8 yards per carry as a team. 185 yards per game, which right now has them at 36th. So really similar. You know, you're looking at a couple hundred yards less in production, a few less touchdowns, and that's just projected. They could explode in the second half. They could get worse in the second half. I think the real point here is the potential for them to have a really good rushing offense. And a lot of people, again, just didn't think that was going to happen. It's clearly there. You look at Jonathan Brooks. He leads all Power 5 running backs with 726 yards. 6.72 yards per carry, which is 14th in the country. He's got 6 touchdowns, which is good for 24th in the country. Man, if they can find a way to get that guy in the end zone more and keep him involved in the pass, he makes some spectacular catches, y'all. I know he struggled early this season. He had a couple drops, and actually, I think 2 of those drops were like touchdowns. But man, has he made some good catches the last few weeks. So if they can figure out a way to get him in the end zone, a la figure out some red zone stuff, man, I think that guy might end up in New York City in December. I'm not saying he wins the Heisman. I'm just saying I think he's probably there if he continues on the pace he's at right now and they can find a way to get him in the end zone a little better. I think the offensive line has been, pretty good in the run game this year. That was kind of a question mark, especially in the middle. Jake Majors has been a guy that's played at center at Texas for a while now, and I think there's kind of been a narrative around the fan base that Jake Majors is not physical enough at the point of attack. And I think that might be fair, like from a consistency perspective, but I think it's not like he's getting blown off the ball all the time. And I think you're playing center. Sometimes you're just going to get popped in the mouth, man. That's a tough position. I played center in 8th grade, and I was never more happy when I showed up to 9th grade, 2-a-days, and immediately got moved to guard. So much easier. But I think we saw how much we missed Jake Majors in the Red River Shootout when he went down. And again, I think Connor Robertson did a really outstanding job of coming into that environment. The kid only had 14 snaps his entire career, all in mop-up duty. He's a redshirt freshman. So I think he did a great job of settling into that game and not letting it fall apart, because that could have easily happened. Centers do a lot of stuff for offensive lines. They get them lined up. They get them in the right protections. They call out defenses. Then they got to be on point with the snaps. He did great. There was not a single time where I went, oh, shit, that's the backup center, and that was a bad snap. This is going to be a problem. He did lose some physical battles. But again, all in all, I thought he played a really good game. But he's not Jake Majors. And then you look at the uncertainty at the right guard position. Cole Hudson was the starter last year as a freshman. Big DJ Campbell was a guy that got recruited and signed with Texas as one of the – he was the highest rated defensive lineman in a really, really highly rated defensive class that included Kelvin Banks, who was a freshman All-American last year at left tackle. So physically, DJ Campbell was like a beast, right? But he struggled. Last year, he struggled. There's a big mental aspect to playing offensive line, and it takes some time to learn that and figure that out. It just takes time, and it takes more time for some than others. So when Cole Hudson was injured in the spring and DJ Campbell had to come in and start taking those reps, and then through fall camp it started to look apparent that DJ Campbell is probably going to be the guy. I think there was some worry there. I mean, I think everybody knew what he could be physically. And he had a rough start this season as well, but, man, he's put it together. He's played really well. So I think the interior of that offensive line, who was probably a liability in some cases last season and definitely a question mark headed into this season, has played really, really well, especially in the run game this year. Defensively, PK's first season defensively was not good at all. There was people calling for PK's head, wanting to get him out of here. Then last year, they bring in Gary Patterson, and the defense improved a lot. And everybody's, that's Gary Patterson's defense. Still get rid of PK. And then Gary Patterson leaves in the offseason. Everybody's worried. Through 5 games, this defense was really, really good. Like, just about dominating. They struggled a little bit in that Red River shootout. We talked a little bit about why earlier in the week. But through 6 games, they're at 16 points per game, 17th in the country. They were 21 points per game in 2022. They're 12th in the country in red zone defense, 68% efficient there in the red zone at keeping people from scoring. Or rather, teams only score at 68%. They were 26th in 2022 with 78% scoring. So pretty big improvement there through halfway through the season. The passing defense, they've given up 1,266 yards so far this season. That's 211 yards per game. That's good for 47th in the country. 6.5 yards per attempt, 11.94 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns. Last season, they were 3,155 yards total, 242 yards per game, which was 90th in the country. 6.3 yards per attempt and 10 yards per catch. 18 touchdowns, though, in 2022. So right now, they're on pace to give up 8 less touchdowns through the air than they did in 2022. And that's big time. And these, from a passing perspective, all these numbers are great. They're going to come in, you can extrapolate it. We'll extrapolate it. May not be perfect, but they're looking at giving up around 700 yards less on the season. That's pretty significant. 14 sacks so far this year. That's good for 56th in the country. They were 27 sacks last season total, which landed them at 71st in the country. And I know PK had an emphasis on it all offseason, man. We've got to finish sacks. And they came out this season and they looked like they were a changed team from a sack perspective. But they haven't done a lot the last couple weeks. Really didn't get any sacks against KU. They had one against Oklahoma. It was a really good play by Anthony Hill running down Dylan Gabriel on the sideline. It wasn't like your traditional sack. Rushing defense was good last year. So far, it's even better this year. They've only given up 674 yards of rushing through 6 games. It's 112 yards per game. That's 29th in the country. 3.42 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns on the ground so far in 2023. Last year, they gave up 1,634 yards per game. Total. 125 yards per game, which was good for 33rd in the country. 3.48 yards per carry and 14 touchdowns in 22. So, again, they're on pace to give up 4 less touchdowns in 2023 than they did in 2022 on the ground. Not a huge improvement, but definitely an improvement. And keep in mind, folks, they have played a really, really tough schedule to this point. Another big emphasis by PK this offseason was turnovers. Texas has just not been good at getting turnovers under Steve Sarkisian. Two fumble recoveries so far this year. That's 80th in the country. They only had 4 last season, which put them at 119th in the country. So they're on pace to be really bad at recovering fumbles. And it's not just that they don't recover. They just don't force them. Just not a lot of opportunities to recover fumbles. I don't know what it is. I do not know what it is. They've got 6 interceptions so far through 6 games in 2023. That's good for 34th in the country. They only had 10 all of last year. So, again, if you extrapolate that out, 12, they'll improve by 2. I guess that's okay. Turnovers and sacks are something that this defense has not been really good at. And I think, those are kind of the 2 biggest plays you can make defensively. Sacks can really, really put an offense behind. And obviously turnovers take it away completely. And so if you want to talk about like an explosive defense and a dominant defense, a defense that can help you win games, and in some cases go out and win the game for you, they're not quite there yet. On pace for 28 sacks this season. That's really not good. It's not any better than it was last year. I mean, Louisville had 50 sacks last season. 50. You're not getting up into the elite sack teams until you're in the 40s, and they're looking at being 12 sacks off of that. That's like 4 or 5 games worth of sacks. Special teams, the punting is a lot better this year. Ryan Sanborn, 46.36 yards per punt. He's nailed 5 inside the 20. Last year, the average was 40.62. There were 13 inside the 20. One of the big differences, and he'd probably have more, Texas just doesn't punt a lot this year. Kicking, not so good this year. 12 of 17, which is 70% so far on field goals. Last year, Bert Auburn was 21 of 26 for 80%. He had a little rough patch. Kicked really well in the Red River Shootout, though. I mean, that's what I think he's certainly capable of on a very consistent basis, is kicking like he did in that game. Definitely not a physical problem. These are all mental problems for these kickers. Kick returns have gotten worse. 15.36 yards per return on kickoffs. Last year, they were 22.48. That's pretty substantial. looking at about 7 yards of field position every single time. Opponent kick returns have also gotten worse this year, which is good for Texas. Last year, they were giving up 17.23 yards per return. This year, it's 15.54. So a little improvement. Punt returns have improved slightly. 12.55 yards per return this year. 9.3 yards per return last year. Opponents are gaining about half a yard more against Texas this year in punt returns, but it's nothing huge, 3.67 yards per return this year. The big thing with the punt returns for me is, well, they obviously had the game against Baylor where they just completely started muffing punts, missing, just not catching the ball, which I think has turned into, if I'm not super confident that I'm going to catch the ball, I'm just going to let it hit the ground. We talked about it on the show probably Monday, an exaggeration Monday. Like, just find someone that'll go catch the ball. I don't care who he is. I don't care if there's no chance in hell that this person can run the ball back. The odds of running back a punt return, not real good. They're big plays when they happen, but the odds aren't good. I mean, I think I'd rather know that I got a guy that'll just go up and catch the ball and save me 10, 15, 20 yards of field position every single time than a guy that won't do that and then bust one for a touchdown once a year. It's a problem. They got to figure it out. Block kicks down this year. 1 punt so far, and that came in Game 6 against the Oklahoma Sooners. Last year they blocked 3 punts and had 1 field goal block. So they're on pace to not even be close to that this year. I'm really surprised with the amount of athletes that this team has that there aren't more explosive type plays in the return game. The kickoff return, when they do it, is not good at all. It's kind of hard to tell why. I don't have coaches' film, so I don't get to see everything from behind like those guys. Don't get to see big wide angles of it like those guys. So in a broadcast, it's kind of hard to tell where the breakdowns are. I assume guys just aren't blocking. That's just an effort thing. Way too talented skill-wise to not be busting some of these plays on special teams. Midseason Awards. We did our preseason awards. We talked about our offensive MVP, defensive MVP, special teams MVP. Offensively, preseason, I had Quinn Ewers. I said, man, Quinn Ewers has got to be the guy. If this team's going to be really good, he's got to be the guy, and I think this team's going to be really good, so he's going to end up being the guy. Defensive MVP, Jalen Ford is who I picked. Was definitely the defensive MVP of the team last year. Was arguably the Big 12 MVP last year. And then special teams MVP, Keelan Robinson. Plays in the return game. He was big on blocks last season. Gunner on the punt team. Just to me, made sense that Keelan Robinson, just because of the sheer amount of snaps he's out there for special teams and the talent he has and the positions he's in when he's out there on the field in special teams, he was our preseason special teams MVP. We look at it halfway through the season, though. My offensive MVP is Jonathan Brooks. Leads the Power 5 in rushing. We already talked about that. 626 yards, 6 touchdowns. He takes so much pressure off Quinn Ewers in the passing game. He is one little miss away from taking it the distance every single time. He's got really good vision. He loves that counterplay. You look at a lot of Jonathan Brooks' big runs, they come off that counterplay. And the cool thing is he's seeing it so well, he's not even following. You know, that play is designed to go a little more outside than where he's usually hitting it. But he sees daylight and he's through it. And it's big time because you got all that motion going with linemen crossing the formation. You got linebackers overreacting to that, and that's where he's seeing these holes. I think there's been times this year when, you know, the passing game wasn't great. They just kind of fed Jonathan Brooks. Good things happen. 4 straight 100-yard games. It'd be a lot more if they give him the ball earlier in the season more. Not saying Quinn can't take it. Not saying Quinn doesn't have great numbers. His numbers are really good. But I think if you took Jonathan Brooks out of this offense, I said it before, and I think I said it after the Baylor game. To me, he's the catalyst of the offense. When he's out there, the thing just kind of goes. When he's not, it just doesn't. Defensive MVP, midseason for me is Jahdae Barron. 32 tackles, 17 solo, 2.5 tackles for loss. He's got an interception. He's got a fumble recovery. I mean, the dude is just all over the field. He's so active around the line of scrimmage. He's such a good tackler. He tears up those little short screen passes. He's not just doing that with quickness either. He like blows up blocks to get in position to make plays. He's not a real big kid, but man, he is like, he just doesn't miss tackles. He shows up and he hits hard. I think Jahdae Barron's going to get overlooked for some postseason type stuff because he's not in coverage that much, you know, deep coverage. He's not in on these like dramatic coverage plays. Typically. I considered T'Vondre Sweat. If someone told me he was the MVP, I wouldn't argue with him too hard. That guy's been holding it down in the middle and wrecking shop. He's like one of the only guys that consistently just blows up everything in front of him. I don't know what he looks like in terms of his grade, so you know, through 6 weeks, but most every single week he's been one of the highest graded defensive tackles in college football. So if you guys think T'Vondre Sweat, I'm not going to argue with you too hard. I just think Jahdae Barron has had a more impactful season. Special teams MVP, I think Keaton Crawford, man. Big time gunner. Blocked a punt against OU that turned into a touchdown. This one was hard for me because there just wasn't a lot. There's not a lot of big special teams plays to look at. We haven't really had that many returns that were big. We've had no scores that were, you know, on special teams outside of that block punt. And I love me some Malik Muhammad, but all he did was just reach down and pick up the ball. I considered Ryan Sanborn. I think punting is important, and he's dropped a couple inside the 5 that have certainly been big difference makers in games. So special teams was tough for me, but Keaton Crawford, man, congratulations. Midseason Horn Takes podcast, special teams MVP. Just some final thoughts on this team halfway through the season. Got to get the red zone figured out offensively. They're in the back half of the nation in efficiency inside the red zone. And it doesn't make any sense. They've got too many weapons. Way too many weapons for that to be the case. The offensive line is good. And I don't think they're great, but they're good. Like, where's the one-on-one ball to Mitchell down in the red zone? Where's the, the ball's on the right hash? Let's just, we're OU game again. We're first and goal at the 1 yard line on the right hash. Where is split AD Mitchell way wide outside the numbers on the left side? And have everybody else piled up on the right hash into the boundary and just throw him a jump ball? Where is that? Just get him isolated one-on-one. I mean, I think he's going to win. He's going to win so many of those battles. Sometimes you don't have to be complex. Sometimes the simplest things are the best things to do. So they got to figure that out, man. That's been a tough deal on them all season. It certainly hurt them in the Red River shootout. And there's potential for it to hurt them these last 6 games of the season in the Big 12. I think the situational defense has got to get better. We saw that just completely fail Texas against OU. Last drive of the first half, they give up points. First drive of the second half, they give up a touchdown. Last drive of the second half, they give up a touchdown. So 17 points in those 3 critical drives. Like, you got to be able to win some of those. Even if it's just one, you got to win. I don't like the prevent stuff that they used against Oklahoma. I think they got to trust the scheme. I think PK's got to trust his scheme, trust his players. I don't like 3 down linemen. They're not getting pressure with 4 down linemen. What makes anybody think they're going to get pressure with 3? Just really don't like the idea of just giving up easy passes. First of all, you're giving him time because you can't get to him with 3. So he's comfortable. He's seeing the field. You're in zone coverage, which nothing's really disguised from the snap, from pre-snap to the snap. When everybody starts going into motion, there's not a lot. There's nothing disguised there. He sees the places where there's going to be openings before the ball's ever snapped. And then the throws are they're against air. They're warm-up throws because there's nobody around. Got to figure out force and turnovers. I don't know that you figure that out. I mean, I think from a fumble perspective, it's a lot of being in position and really raking hard at the ball. It's a lot of showing up real pissed off when you're about to hit somebody. We saw the defensive backs Saturday against Oklahoma miss a whole lot of tackles on the perimeter. It's because they're worried about, I get it, man. They're in man-to-man coverage, but they're playing 12 yards off. So you can't just run up full speed. I mean, at some point you got to break down. I hated it. I hated it. Conversely, you saw Bowman come up and bust the shit out of Quinn Ewers, bodied him up hard. He fumbles the ball. I mean, I think, from a fumble perspective, I think that's all you can do. Turnovers, the wide or the interceptions. Make plays. You had one in the end zone, you dropped it. I think Texas has been in pretty good position, coverage-wise, the majority of the season. They've been in position to make plays. Just got to make plays. I just feel like they're way too talented everywhere defensively to not have more turnovers. Need to figure out how to convert more sacks. We talked about that. The edge rushers, to me, have gone completely dormant. I think they started out the season pretty good. It was kind of promising. And the last few weekends, last few games, it's been, really going back to that Baylor game was the last time the edge guys played a big part in the game from a pass rush perspective. I asked this all last season. I'll ask it again. I probably asked it earlier. Is there not a guy on the Texas roster that's maybe undersized? He's a younger kid, but's really fast. Maybe like a Billy Walton. That in obvious pass situations, they can't get him in the game. These guys on the edge for Texas are just, I don't know, man. I just don't see any explosiveness coming off the corner. Need to see more Ant Hill, and we need to see him in linebacker blitzes. We need to see him lined up on the edge. Anthony Hill, to me, and again, I'm not saying he's Micah Parsons, but I think he's that type of impactful guy. He could be. I mean, Micah Parsons came to the NFL as a linebacker and spent like 10 seconds playing linebacker. He's too valuable off the edge. Maybe Ant Hill's more valuable off the edge than as a true linebacker. Maybe. I don't know. I think this team absolutely can still win the Big 12. I think this team absolutely still has an outside shot at the playoff. I think if they go undefeated the rest of the season, Oklahoma goes undefeated the rest of the season, they play in the Big 12 and Texas wins that game, depending on what's going on in the rest of the country, I think they have a pretty good case to make a 14 playoff. The back half of the season, from a schedule perspective, definitely sets up better for Texas. It's not nearly as strong as this first half of the season has been. Need to take this bye week opportunity to get healthy, get refocused. We've seen Texas teams in the past let this OU game just send them into a damn death spiral. 5 straight losses after the OU game in 2021. Got to get refocused, got to be better there. And they got to figure out these 4 things we just talked about. I mean, if they can make improvements in these areas that we just talked about, man, I mean, the talent's there. The ability to move the ball is there. Like, everything is there. Big playability on defense is there. Special teams is there. Just got to execute it. Random college football thoughts. Who's the best team in the country right now? Man, this one's a tough one. I don't have anything to back any of this up. I mean, I think if you look at it, to me, you're looking at, I feel like Georgia and Michigan are kind of in a separate echelon of teams than everybody else right now. And for Michigan, it's the defense, man. They are just, I think they're giving up like 6 points a game. They're giving up less than a touchdown a game defensively. And the offense is not bad. It just doesn't put up a ton of points because it's very, methodical, pro-style type stuff. It's not, it's not this 5 wide receivers, let's chunk it all over the park thing. It's like just wear your ass out for 4 quarters. And the other team feels way worse just barely losing by 30 than they would getting ate up by 70 against somebody else. Georgia defensively is really good as well. Their offense has kind of looked struggly at times this year. Last week they opened up a can on Kentucky, 51 points in that game. And then I think you got to look at like Florida State, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Texas. The Pac teams, you got Washington, you got USC that's still undefeated, but I don't think USC is going to win their conference. Oregon, another team out there in the Pac. I think the Pac-12 championship is going to be between Washington and Oregon. I don't even think USC is going to make it. So I think all those teams to me are in another bubble, just right there. I don't know how far below or close to or whatever, but I definitely feel like Michigan and Georgia are the cream of the crop this year. And I think Michigan's kind of getting glanced over because they're just not flashy. And they really haven't played too many great teams yet this year. So obviously we'll find out more as we continue to go through the season. There's probably going to be a lot more upsets, a lot more things that kind of throw wrenches in all these things. But if I had to say who's the best right now, I'd say it's a coin flip between Michigan and Georgia. You guys let me know what you think. Tomorrow we'll do Prediction Friday. We'll do our Week 7 Trace Ultra games. We'll dig into the second half of Texas's schedule. Just give some thoughts on what we think about who they're playing, what we think their chances are against those teams. Can Texas go undefeated through those 6 games? We'll have some more random college football thoughts. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow and subscribe. We appreciate it. It won't cost you a thing. Email us at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys get hooked. Have a good Thursday. Friday Eve, they say. That's what I say. You guys get hooked.